Let me take you back. It was summer of 2016, San Diego Comic-Con was in full force, and Sega was hosting a Sonic the Hedgehog fan event that had been teased for months prior on the official Sonic Twitter account. Up to this point, fans were starved of a brand new, good game, as the most recent installment up to this point, 2014's Sonic Boom Rise of Lyric, was just a terrible game that left a bad taste in everyone's mouth. And even then, some would argue 2013's Sonic Lost World was also a bad game. I wouldn't agree with those people, but for a lot of people, the last good game was 2011's Sonic Generations, so needless to say, people were pretty anxious. Many people were really looking forward to this event as they thought this would be the opportunity for Sega to announce a new game. Little did we know they would have 2 games in store for us, but let's start from the beginning. At the beginning of the event, a trailer was shown for the now critically acclaimed Sonic Mania, a game that brought back a 16-bit art style and brought Sonic back to his Genesis days in terms of gameplay that had many people excited. The trailer was very well done, and it was clearly to show off that it was a brand new anniversary game, and I was very excited about it. But not as excited as I will be later on, because at first I thought this would be all that we were getting after all this time, when I really just wanted a brand new mainline 3D game. Anyway, the remainder of the event consisted of numerous problems, including a bunch of Tostino's product placement for some reason, and numerous problems that also plagued the stream, most notably being a random buzzing sound that plagued the entire stream, and it was so potent and annoying that they even referenced it in Sonic Mania. It was all pretty funny to see it go down, honestly. This whole live stream event that they've been teasing for months just being a complete train wreck. Like, what else would we expect from this series at this point? At the very end of the event, they finally showed off a brand new teaser trailer. The trailer started off by showing modern Sonic in the midst of a city that had been utterly destroyed, running through it, dodging obstacles. He continues running down the street, dodging these obstacles and projectiles until a particularly large projectile seems that it's about to collide with him and hit him until he is saved by classic Sonic. In the heat of the moment, I was just excited to see a brand new game, one with a very interesting premise even. Dr. Eggman has apparently taken over 99% of the world and Sonic needs to form a resistance to get the world back. At this point, this brand new title did not have a name, it was just simply known as Project 2017. And also at the very end of the trailer, Takeshi Iizuka, who is a longtime Sonic producer, told the audiences that this is not in fact a sequel to any game, so it could be opened up to a brand new, completely original story. Throughout the following months, Sega kept sprinkling little tidbits and news about the game, starting off with a 30-second trailer of modern Sonic gameplay. Now this is where I got more than excited for the game, as the gameplay showed that they were bringing back the boost formula that was created in 2008's Sonic Unleashed and continued to be used in fan favorites Sonic Colors and Sonic Generations. That just so happened to be my favorite gameplay style in all of 3D Sonic. Seeing it come back after 5 long years was such a relief for me because every game that it was used in prior to Forces was fantastic. Oh yeah, on the same day that this trailer was dropped, the name of the game was dropped as well, Sonic Forces, which I thought was a fitting name for what the premise of the story was going for. Not only that, but we were also treated to an instrumental version of the main theme of the game, which would later be titled Fist Bump. Later in the year, during the 2017 April Nintendo Direct, a new playable character was teased at the very end of the trailer that they showed for Sonic Forces that had many people wondering who the heck it could be. All we had to go off at the time was a silhouette that unironically had a striking resemblance to Bubsy the Bobcat of all people. There was a lot of speculation going around about who this new character could be and how it would compare to the 2 other gameplay styles that are currently being presented. It wasn't long until we got our answer though. Sega dropped a brand new trailer for the game about a month after the Direct that showed off who the new character was. It was a customizable character / avatar that you can, customize to your liking. From what was shown off, he played similarly to modern Sonic but with a new grapple attack, and he can make use of gadgets that will later be dubbed Wispins. Opinions were mixed on this reveal as many fans didn't feel an avatar character was a necessary addition to a Sonic game, while other people were excited just to be able to get their original characters in an actual licensed Sonic game and fight along the Blue Blur. I myself normally don't particularly care for blank slate custom characters in games, at least from a story perspective, because they're mostly just silent and kind of bore me. There's exceptions to this, but that's not really important to this video. However, from a gameplay perspective, I was fairly excited for the custom hero, only due to the fact that it meant the majority of the game was seemingly going to be 3D action in the style of the boost formula to counteract my ever-waning feelings towards classic Sonic's inclusion in this title. Yeah, as time went on, I just kept getting less and less okay with classic Sonic finding his way into this game, especially when Mania was coming out, but I was still optimistic nonetheless, like I said earlier. As the months went on, Sega continued to release new info for the game little by little until the next full trailer was released during E3 of 2017. This trailer showed that Sonic was not only up against Dr. Eggman, but a whole slew of old villains making their return. These villains included Metal Sonic, Zavok, Zavok from Sonic Lost World, Chaos from Sonic Adventure, now that's some fan service, and Shadow, who has been a good guy for a while now, but interesting to see him being a villain again. The return of all these villains left many speculating and excited. But these didn't compare to the introduction of the brand new mysterious villain, Infinite. At this point, we didn't know much about the new face in town, but I didn't really care. It just got me even more excited for this game than I already was, honestly. From this point on, news for the game was delivered in very scarce quantities from the official Sonic the Hedgehog YouTube channel at fairly random intervals. We eventually finally got that lyrical version of the main theme, titled Fist Bump, that I mentioned earlier. I can't do this alone, even though I am strong. Need something more than me, someone to push me to victory. And then, a few weeks later, we got a trailer showing off the overly edgy new villain alongside his new theme, which is also incredibly edgy and giving off those Linkin Park vibes. We kept receiving these little tidbits of information up until the release of the game, without really any more main trailers until the launch trailer the day the game came out. However, a few weeks before the game came out, an official demo was released to the public on the North American PlayStation 4 store and the Japanese Nintendo eShop, which I just found really weird way to do it. Why didn't they just put it on all consoles in all regions? But whatever. It consisted of 2 levels and a boss fight. This demo was pretty bad in all honesty, for one simple reason. All of the levels had a very short 1-minute time limit that made it so you couldn't complete any of the levels unless you got incredibly good. The levels shown off also weren't particularly impressive in my opinion, but I figured they were probably the first levels in the game, so they were bound to be simple and easy, right? After a little bit more news about the game, we finally approached the release date of November 7th, 2017. It came out on a Tuesday, so normally I would have had to wait until the end of the school day to play it. However, that particular day was a half day and I figured I probably wouldn't miss anything important, so I decided to skip school for the first time in my life. I had the game preloaded to my Xbox with maximum excitement that I could not contain. I started playing it as soon as it released and didn't stop until I had beaten it. It was only 3 a.m. when I beat it. Well, it's been a few years since that. What do I think of the actual game? Let's start with the plot synopsis. Beware of spoilers if you, for some reason, care or haven't played the game. The story starts with a very confident Eggman exclaiming that his new plan will finally allow him to destroy Sonic with a short tease of the new villain, Infinite. Then we jump straight into the first level as Sonic is running through a sandy green hill zone with Tails telling him that the city is under attack. Which city exactly? We're never told, but apparently Sonic knows exactly where to go. One bad sandhill joke later, and we are treated to a cutscene of Sonic saving Tails and some other NPCs from some of Eggman's robots before attempting to attack Eggman head-on. As Sonic attempts to attack Eggman, he is seemingly stopped by not only Shadow, but Metal Sonic, Chaos, and Zavok! Before Sonic can even comprehend what is going on, another foe appears that Sonic attempts to attack, but he is quickly stopped and beaten to a pulp by all 5 of them. This new foe being the same exact one that was teased in the first cutscene of the game, Infinite. Don't worry, we'll be seeing plenty of him later on. After Sonic is defeated, he is presumed dead, and Eggman's forces quickly take over the world over a period of 6 months. Now, I think this is a very interesting idea that I think has the potential to open up to many great and interesting plot points. Sonic dying is nothing new for the series. Look at 06 and Boom, for example. This game shares a plot point with some of the worst in the series. I hope that isn't a bad sign. However, instead of actually seeing what happens in a world without Sonic, we just have a 6-month time skip. This is where we're treated to the Resistance, headed by Knuckles, who hasn't really had a major role in a mainline Sonic game since 2009's Sonic and the Black Knight. But even then, that isn't even technically him, that's Sir Gawain. You can tell because we know Knuckles wouldn't kill himself.
To lose to a mere apprentice, I have been disgraced. Only death can remove this stain upon my honor.
At this point, it's really nice to see him back in a really important role, and it could have been a great step up for his character, but he doesn't really end up doing much. He does give a pretty badass speech in the launch trailer for the game, though.
Our cities are falling. The world is being conquered by Dr. Eggman. To take back our home, we'll need speed, power, and courage. It'll be tough, but we need you.
The resistance he has created doesn't only have him, but it also consists of a lot of other Sonic's friends, including Silver, for some reason. Seriously? Why is he here? I mean, like, I like him and all. He's voiced by Quentin Flynn, who's an absolute legend that voices Axel from Kingdom Hearts and Raiden from Metal Gear Solid, but, like, why? Didn't he go back to his own future at the end of 06? Well, apparently this is explained in the tie-in comic before the game came out. Yeah, in order to advertise the game, Sega created 4 short tie-in comics that acted as a little extra material to help flesh out this game's plot. I won't go into detail as they aren't super important, but they do explain certain things like why Silver is here and how Eggman got the Phantom Ruby. Even then, it's not really important, because Silver doesn't really do much in the story anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I could honestly say that about all the non-playable heroes in the game. They don't do much other than provide flavor text throughout the levels and cutscenes. This is the point when the Avatar character is introduced to the story as a new member of the Resistance. He is treated as a rookie throughout the entire game and is addressed as such, except when they start calling him Buddy later on. The Resistance soon gets intel that Sonic is in fact alive and is being held captive aboard the Death Egg. Very original. This whole time skip just kinda ends up feeling inconsequential because literally between the first and second level of the game, the Resistance finds out where Sonic is and creates a plan to save him. I really would have enjoyed from a story perspective if we got to see what actually happens during this time skip. You know, maybe seeing Knuckles form the Resistance, how he bands everyone together to fight Eggman, what everyone thinks of Eggman, and how he took over the world. Just all of that stuff just seemed really interesting, but it all is a missed opportunity. After Sonic is rescued, the remainder of the game consists of Sonic and the rest of the Resistance fighting back Eggman's forces and trying to find the source of Infinite's seemingly infinite power. They encounter Infinite a number of times throughout the rest of the game and learn that the source of his power is a special gem called the Phantom Ruby that can basically do whatever the plot needs it to do. Seriously, I swear they just make up crap for it as it goes on. It can create holograms, there's a whole deal with prototypes midway to the end of the game that I really still don't understand. And it also, all those past villains that Sonic fought in the beginning of the game were just projections that Infinite created using the Phantom Ruby, which is super lame and I'd say is borderline false advertising. You literally never once fight Chaos or Shadow in the entire game. Thank God we got to fight fucking Zavok though. He's my favorite character in Team Sonic Racing. Seriously, why does Sega keep bringing him back? No one likes Zavok. But come on, what was the point of basically lying to fans about bringing these villains back other than to give them false hope? I thought Chaos coming back especially could have been a very interesting idea. This didn't have to be the main focus, but maybe one of the playable characters could have been trying to find the Chaos Emeralds to make sure Chaos couldn't get them and transform again. This could have even led to a good excuse to have a Supersonic final boss for the first time in a 3D game in a while. The last time was in Generations, which was a bad fight, but before that we had Unleashed, which wasn't a very good fight, and then we had 06, which wasn't a very good fight, and then Shadow? Anyway, after Knuckles leads the entire Resistance to their demise, this is actually an event that occurs, I'm not joking.
Stay calm. What you're seeing isn't real.
It's no use. Our troops are scattering in the confusion. This is Eagle Squad. We're caught in enemy crossfire. Snake Squad requesting reinforcements. This is Frog Squad. We can't hold up at 4.
80% of our forces have been wiped out, and we've lost contact with the rest.
Our big wave is washed out.
It all ends with a big battle between the heroes and villains that ultimately lead to Sonic and the Avatar using the power of friendship to defeat Eggman and free the world of his tyranny with the help of classic Sonic. Oh yeah, remember him? Because the game certainly doesn't. Remember the true ending of Sonic Mania when Sonic gets pulled into some mysterious portal by the Phantom Ruby? Yeah, it originated in that game. Well, that Sonic was pulled into this game's world and I guess helps the Resistance defeat Eggman's forces. He doesn't really end up doing all that much in the plot except hang out with Tails in the beginning and have a short scuffle with Eggman pretty early in the game. He really feels rushed in the story and doesn't end up amounting to much in the end. Overall, the story is pretty meh. I find it pretty lame that all the past villains are mere projections of themselves, and Infinite himself also isn't particularly great. He's a one-note, cocky and edgy villain that thinks he's above everyone, and he doesn't really amount to much more than that. His backstory is also a complete joke. There's a free DLC for the game where you get to play as Shadow for 3 levels, which is where we discover Infinite's origins. This is where we learn that he was a mercenary that worked for Dr. Eggman. During the second level of Shadow's DLC, he's going through and destroying one of Eggman's facilities, and also takes out all of Infinite's squad, apparently, even though all of the enemies in the level are the same badniks you see in the rest of the game. At the end of the level, Infinite confronts Shadow in a cutscene and gets his ass kicked. That's it. He then screams that he's not weak, and then, I don't know, takes off with the Ruby of Infinite bullshit from Eggman, and becomes a plot device. I honestly would have preferred if we just never found out his backstory, because this just makes him seem like a big whiny baby than the looming, threatening presence that the game wants to present him as. Throughout the entire game, after you beat certain levels, a bar fills up showing how much of the world the Resistance has taken back from Eggman. But you don't really feel that at all in the story itself. You just go on mission after mission, but you never really feel like you accomplish anything until the end of the game, which I'll admit is a fairly exciting climax. The presentation of the ending sequence is kind of weak, especially the big battle with all the characters just has a lot of kind of boring static animation going on. But the levels and the actual plot going on kept changing things up and honestly surprised me a little bit by giving all 3 main characters, even classic Sonic, an actual role. This all ends with a climactic battle against the Doctor himself featuring some awesome music. Like I've said before, overall, I think the story has a lot of missed opportunities considering the incredibly interesting premise and what should have been an amazing cast of villains just wasted. Sonic having to build a resistance force to take back the world from Dr. Eggman is an amazing idea on paper that can lead to so many fun and entertaining moments. But all of this potential is wasted on the whole game being focused on figuring out how to defeat Infinite, which I acknowledge should be an important plot point, but I think that should have only been left to one of the characters while the other 2 focus on pushing Eggman's troops back and releasing his grip on the world. In fact, I think the first few levels of the game after Sonic's death should have just starred the Avatar character trying to fight back Eggman as he is in the process of taking over the world, or at least there could have been a few cutscenes or a montage showing Eggman take over the world, forcing Knuckles to create the Resistance, rather than just a time skip. I also feel that Sonic should have remained out of contact from the Resistance throughout the majority of the game. I think he should have escaped the Death Egg on his own, as he kinda does in the actual story. I don't really know why his cell just opens, but that's not really important. At this point, he could spend a decent chunk of the game by himself taking out Eggman's bases and trying to find out what happened to his friends before eventually running into the Avatar character on a mission and finally joining up with the Resistance. At this point of the story, Sonic can take on missions trying to figure out the source of Infinite's power while the other 2 characters continue taking on Eggman's forces and the other villains. This will end in a similar final confrontation between the heroes and villains as the base game that will end with the heroes taking back the world. If I were to write the story of the game, that's personally what I would have changed. However, the story that is actually presented is pretty bland with some decent moments. It could have been a lot better, but it could have been a lot worse. It's serviceable for a Sonic plot, which ultimately isn't that important for a Sonic game. No one really plays the game for the plot. And I can say it's probably the best plot in the series since Black Knight. That's not really saying that much, but I just wish they did a lot more with it. That's just my own personal take on it, though. The way the game is presented is a mixed bag. On one hand, the game has some beautiful visuals that rival even Unleashed and Generations graphics, in some cases even surpass those games. The game is colorful and everything is nicely detailed. A+ overall in my book. Some levels like A Gate and Sunset Heights in particular just look amazing. The backgrounds in those levels are great. The way the story is presented, however, is pretty lazy overall. Instead of every bit of the story being presented in proper cutscenes, I'd argue around 80% of the story is shown in static, boring text boxes. What an incredibly lame and lazy way to tell a story in a game made by a huge publisher in 2017. At least the voice acting is good overall. Everyone performs their role well, especially Roger Craig Smith as Sonic, who continues to be the definitive voice for him in my opinion.
Great! See, Infinite? Now we're getting to know each other. So, what's your favorite color? Do you like long, romantic walks on the beach? What's the source of your power? You can skip the first 2 questions if you like.
Speaking of audio design, the music in this game is very good stuff in my opinion, especially the songs that play in modern Sonic stages. I can't get enough of this stuff. My favorite track being the one that plays in Sunset Heights. I also really enjoy the music that plays in the Avatars levels. They're all poppy songs with lyrics. Some of the songs are pretty cheesy, but others, like Aqua Road, are just very good on the ears. The only part of the soundtrack that's iffy for me is the music that plays in classic Sonic's levels. It's all supposed to be like songs from the Genesis days that all end up being more annoying and ear-grating than anything. I'll admit, some of them are actually a guilty pleasure of mine though, such as Ghost Town, absolute banger. The presentation of the game is pretty decent overall for a Sonic game, but pretty levels and good music don't make for a good game. The gameplay is what really makes or breaks a game. Look, I know I've complained a lot about the plot up to this point, but if the actual game is good, then I'll still enjoy it. Just look at Mega Man X4 for example. The plot of that game is atrocious, but the actual game is damn good.
No, this isn't happening! There's no reason for me to go on. What am I fighting for?
If you couldn't tell from previously, this game consists of 3 playable characters. Well, technically 4 if you include Shadow. There are 3 different game styles. I'll go in the order that the styles are presented in the game, starting with Modern Sonic. His style of gameplay is taken from the previous Boost titles. To reiterate, this style of gameplay is taken from Sonic Unleashed, Colors, and Generations. However, it takes most of its inspiration from Colors, as all 4 of these games have a unique spin on the Boost formula, but this one is closest to Colors. The style of gameplay consists of large 3D levels that merge into 2D sections and back seamlessly. The reason I put large in quotes will be discussed in a bit. In Forces, Sonic can run, double jump, stomp, slide, quick step to the left or right by the push of a button, use the tried and true homing attack, and most notably, use the namesake of the gameplay style, Boost. In Sonic Forces, Sonic builds up the boost gauge when he either defeats enemies or collects white wisp capsules that are scattered throughout the level. In previous titles, Sonic was able to drift around corners, but that feature was removed in Forces, and now Sonic sort of auto-turns around corners, which is not a change that I'm a fan of, but we'll get back to that in a sec. When the boost gauge is filled and you press the left face button, Sonic will run at max speed and destroy any enemies that are in his way. In Unleashed and Generations, you would tend to hold down the boost button in most situations to keep the speed up, as filling the boost gauge was way easier in those games, but in this game you have to be more conservative when you want to boost and when you should save it. I personally prefer the Unleashed and Generation style to this approach of boosting, as you can use it almost as much as you want if you were skilled enough at the game, and you can run through the levels at blazing speeds. As stated earlier, Sonic Forces brought back the double jump from Colors in Lost World, and I think this is the stupidest addition to this game. It feels like the double jump barely rises Sonic a quarter of the height of his default jump, making it nearly useless, and for me, unnecessarily complicated. There have been many times where I try to jump over a large gap thinking that my double jump would be all that I need to get across, but then I would just die as a result. Speaking of stupid gameplay tweaks, what happened to the drift? In Unleashed and Generations, in some parts of Colors, Sonic was able to drift around tight corners by the push of a button that usually led to really fun and challenging level design, especially in Unleashed. But in Forces, it is just gone for seemingly no reason besides lazy design. This mechanic being gone means that Sonic is basically on autopilot around sharp turns, where he just turns by himself and it's daunting. We haven't even discussed the absolute worst part about modern Sonic's gameplay in this game, and this also affects the other two characters as well. The level design in most of the game is incredibly bland and uninspired. Most of the time with modern Sonic, you are just mindlessly boosting through enemies or going through boring homing attack chain after boring homing attack chain, or through some relatively straightforward progression. In previous Boost titles, the levels were large 3 to 5 minute obstacle courses that often had multiple paths and require quick reflexes to be able to successfully navigate without dying. They all had really fun set pieces and were really good at changing things up to keep the levels feeling fresh and fun. In Forces, most of the levels are less than 2 minutes long and almost none of them have memorable set pieces, with a couple of exceptions like when Sonic fights a giant snake in a fake QuickTime event. These QuickTime events are kinda cool and have kinda neat visuals, but there's no chance of failing since the button prompt is only for score and not actually for progression. There's no way to fail them. The only cool new addition to his gameplay style that I can think of is that we can finally play as a different character, being Shadow, who I mentioned earlier. He isn't super important to the plot, but you can select him in almost all of modern Sonic's levels after beating them, which is something I think they should have done since Generations, but hey, this is better late than never. In summary, modern Sonic's gameplay is just a step back overall. It's incredibly bland, and I'm not a fan of the gameplay tweaks presented. The only time I ever really found his gameplay to be fun was when me and a friend started to try speed running his Sunset Heights level for a few hours. It was actually really fun to try to break the game in order to get the fastest time. I even have a video of my best time on this channel. But the thing is, this is the only Sonic game where I need to do something like this in order to find any enjoyment from it, and that's really not a point in the game's favor. Granted, I know what you want to do in most Sonic games is to go fast, but I don't think the developers really expect you to try to break the game in order to find any fun from it. Next up is the Avatar character, which in all honesty doesn't play that differently from modern Sonic, but almost all of his changes are for the worse. He can run, jump, but only one jump. I swear, the double jump is so unnecessary. Use a grappling hook as a makeshift homing attack and use whatever gadget he has equipped. These gadgets are called Wispins, like I said earlier, and the Wispins are obviously the most different part about the Avatar. They give you a different way to take out enemies, such as a mid-range flamethrower, to a drill that you need to charge up and get a quick boost of speed. I've always just stuck to the flamethrower, as it's what you start with, and I always found that it gives me satisfying results. Plus I find the burst wisp really helpful with platforming, aka jumping over all of the boring, bland level design. But yeah, I should talk about that. Every Wispin will allow you to use only one specific wisp when you get the correct wisp capsule. So, for example, the only way to use the burst wisp is when you have the flamethrower Wispin equipped. I don't mind this because that means that all the wisps are completely optional in the levels, which is how I prefer wisps to be used. However, the Avatar's jump is completely out of whack. I honestly hate it. He doesn't roll up into a ball like the other two characters, meaning that he can't attack enemies while jumping. And once you do jump, there is no way to influence your direction in midair at all. Think about it like the classic Castlevania jump, where your character is committed to the direction of that jump until they land. It's very close to that, especially if you have a lot of momentum behind the jump. I have no other way that I can explain it. It's just really bad. I think this might be an unpopular opinion, but the Avatar's gameplay is probably my least favorite of the three. It's so close to modern Sonic's gameplay, but it's held back by a gimmick that often forces you to halt your progress to take out enemies in a very mindless fashion. There is nothing fun about stopping my progress, holding a button, and aiming at enemies. Sonic Heroes combat, this ain't. The Avatar also suffers from the same level design issues that I discussed with modern Sonic section, so there's no point to repeat that. So to sum up the Avatar, his gameplay mostly suffers from the same problems as modern Sonic, as he is just the same as modern Sonic with a slight gimmick. Before moving on to the actual last gameplay style, I should mention there are a few levels where you play as both Sonic and the Avatar, giving you their full arsenal of moves, which gives me some cool Sonic Heroes flashbacks. It's not nearly as fleshed out as Heroes, but it's kind of a neat thing. Finally, the last gameplay style to be discussed is Classic Sonic, and what can I say? His gameplay is very similar to that of his appearance in Generations. He runs in exclusively 2D sections, he can jump on enemies, use his spin dash, and new to his arsenal taken straight from Sonic Mania, he can use the jump dash, which essentially means that he can do a spin dash out of a jump, which is an incredibly fun new addition that I'm happy they put in this game. There's really not much more to say here, as he suffers the same problems as the other two, as his levels are also really short. A weird thing I have with him in this game though, especially because I really wasn't looking forward to him being in this game, is that his gameplay style might be my favorite. Don't get me wrong, I'm still not super happy that he's in this game at all. But it's just really weird, because sometimes I think he has the best gameplay in this game, and other times I think he has the worst. His levels often feel the most complete, as there are sometimes multiple pathways with power-ups to get. And some are decently challenging and kind of change up a bit, especially his last level, even though it has an auto-scrolling section, which is very anti-Sonic, but it's not too bad. But yeah, like I've said many times before in this same video, his inclusion in the game is just entirely unnecessary and unneeded from a story perspective, and the music in his levels are laughable for Sonic standards. And I'm also just going to put it out there that none of his levels come even close to any of the levels in the classic games, and especially Sonic Mania. The only thing that I haven't mentioned up to this point are the boss fights, which take the bland level design and just put that into a boss fight, and that's essentially what all of these fights are. They are all super easy and take almost no effort to kill. You fight Zavok, Metal Sonic, Eggman twice, and Infinite 3 times. They're all standard fights, and none of them do anything new for the series. And the final boss is literally another copy and paste of the Colors final boss, which granted was a great fight for the time, but come on guys, you barely got away with this in Lost World, how could you think you could do it again? The only boss that I could say is somewhat interesting is Zavok's fight, because it's the only boss in all of the Boost games that isn't a runner boss. It's super easy, but it's a nice change of pace. Also, the encounter with Metal Sonic and the last fight with Infinite are both clearly just copy and paste of each other with slightly different moves. It's embarrassing. And speaking of Infinite, the first fight with him, you run on Lost World tubes and even go on the Lost World springs. Like, did they just reuse those assets and hope no one would notice, or what? Maybe it's supposed to be a callback, but it really doesn't come off as that. All of these bosses are pretty easy. In fact, the whole game is too easy. When you first start up, you are asked if you want to play on normal or hard mode, which as far as I know is the first time in the series. I don't even know what normal mode is like because I've always played in hard mode and the game is still a complete joke. You have infinite lives and the levels are over before you know it and they almost never challenge the player. So, in case I haven't made this point clear enough, I was not satisfied with Sonic Forces. In fact, I was very disappointed with what was presented to me as a brand new 3D, next-gen Sonic game that was going to move the series forward. On one hand, the visuals are absolutely gorgeous, and I've become addicted to a ton of the music, but that is all standard for the series. On the other hand, the story is filled with a lot of missed potential, and the gameplay is so meh compared to previous entries. It's also really short, too. My first playthrough was less than 3 hours, which would be fine if I felt like my time and money wasn't wasted, but I'm sorry, it really felt like it was. This isn't my least favorite game in the series, but it's not even close to my favorite. This whole experience around this game taught me not to get drawn to the hype for any future Sonic titles or any games in general, as anything could turn out to be a train wreck or just bad no matter how cool it looks before it comes out. Now, Sonic Forces is not a train wreck, but I do not recommend it unless you are a Sonic fan. It has been almost 3 years since this game came out, and the only other Sonic games to have come out in the meantime are a couple of spin-offs with no mainline title announced. I really hope Sonic Team can look at the mistakes of this game and make something truly special next time, but who knows with this series. Thanks for watching.